Where'd you go?
All right. All right, everyone, we're going to gavel down. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'd like to call this meeting back into session. And welcome everyone back. You're running a little bit behind. It's 12:45. We'll make it up. Ms. Ricchetti, could you please call the item?
The next item is K3B, Property Tax Deputy Director's Report, Operational Updates, and Propositional 19, Implementation Actions and Guidelines and Guidance. Report on the status of pending and upcoming projects, activities, and departmental issues. This item will be presented by Mr. Young.
Thank you. Mr. Young, welcome back. Mr. Young and team, I should say. It's good to see you all.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Chair Cohen, honorable members of the board. David Young here, Deputy Director of the Property Tax Department. I will go over 4 items for the department's implementation of Prop 19, our actions that we've undertaken so far. So the first item is, as Mr. Nanjo has already mentioned, we are involved in basically amending Property Tax Rule 462.520 and 462.540, and that is for the intergenerational transfers and the base year transfers respectively. The proposed language has been sent out to stakeholders through a LTA. Comments are due back at the end of this month on the 29th. At that time, we will work with legal in reviewing the comments. Our goal, as Mr. Nanjo has mentioned, will be to bring the language before the board in May for board's consideration and action. The next item has to do with the inquiries. As you've heard, we've answered about 3,000, a little over 3,000 inquiries last year. Staff continues to get a fairly decent amount of inquiries monthly. Our staff is turning those around quickly, and we are stepping up and getting those inquiries answered. The third item is staff is currently working on reviewing and revising forms as it pertains to Prop 19. We are working with the California Assessors Association. They're a form subcommittee. They are in revision right now, and once again, they will be brought before the board. After a final revision, they'll be brought before the board for consideration and action. And lastly, I've mentioned our website, and in particular, we have a dedicated page to provide information on Prop 19. It is under constant review. We are taking a look at it right now to make sure all the information on there is still accurate, up to date, and comports to SB 539 and the 2 new property tax laws that SB 539 added to the Revenue and Taxation Code. So with that, I'm available for any questions you may have.
Great. Let's see, colleagues, any questions?
Okay.
Doesn't look like we have any. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. The next sub-item is letters to assessors, presented by Ms. Schultz.
Good afternoon, Chair Cohen and honorable board members. I'm Glenna Schultz, Principal Property Appraiser over the BoE's Assessment Services Unit. Sorry about that. And Training and Certification Unit. Today, I will provide you with a brief report on letters to assessors. Attached to the agenda this month is a memo on letters to assessors, which provides a list of the LTAs that have been issued since our last board meeting. In addition, it provides a link to the BoE's website where a list of all LTAs can be found that have been issued to date. As of the date of the attached memo, BoE staff have issued a total of 16 LTAs for calendar year 2022, and 3 of those LTAs have been issued since our last board meeting. Those LTAs are summarized as follows. As already mentioned, an LTA announcing the interested parties process to promulgate amendments to Property Tax Rule 462.520 for Proposition 19 intergenerational transfer exclusions, and to Property Tax Rule 462.540 for Proposition 19 base year value transfers due to the passing of Senate Bill 539 and the addition of Section 63.2 and 69.6 to the Revenue and Taxation Code. An LTA to issue an assessment practices survey report for Sierra County, and an LTA which provides notification that the BoE, following a public hearing, amended Property Tax Rule 302, called the Board's Function and Jurisdiction. This amendment to the rule was approved by the Office of Administrative Law and became effective on March 9, 2022. This amendment was made to address an incorrect cross-reference in Subdivision B of the rule that occurred after the addition and renumbering of Subdivision A in 2020. This concludes my report on letters to assessors. I'm available to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you. Mr. Vescas?
Just one, excuse me, just one quick one. You know, since the amendments to, you mentioned Rule 302,
No, this did not go through the interested parties process.
okay, thank you.
Anyone, any questions on this end, on my left?
Yeah,
Please.
just a question if I could, in reference to Sierra County, did you say that the survey was completed?
I'm sorry, I didn't understand that.
Was the survey completed for Sierra County?
Was Sierra County,
Yes.
was a survey completed for Sierra County?
Yes.
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 Okay, great. I'm just curious.
See how important it is to translate?
Yeah, thank you. We need that button.
Right.
But I'm just curious in terms of, it's one of the smallest counties in the state. I think Alpine is the smallest population-wise. But can you tell me just a little bit about how a survey is conducted for a county of that nature versus LA County?
I'd be more than happy, if I may, I'd be more than happy to address that. With the county of that size, we all, the basic rules of engagement are about the same. What we do is we send, before we go, we send them a list of documents that we would need in order to do so. But, and then we schedule a time where we show up, now that we're going back to live in-person type surveys. Prior to this, last 2 years, we've been doing it mostly all remotely and virtual, and remotely by computer or by phone. But with these smaller counties, the main difference is we are very sensitive to our folks coming into their office. Our presence is more of a disruption for the smaller counties. As you've already mentioned, Sierra's amongst the smaller counties. Alpine is probably the smallest. They have a staff of like 3.5 PYs. When we send our staff in, we double the size of their office, and our footprint can be an issue. So we take particular care in scheduling and having our folks go in and asking for documentation and whatnot. We try to always tailor it to the county in which we are surveying.
Great, thank you.
Of course,
I know Assessor Marshall does a good job up there
absolutely.
with limited
Absolutely.
resources. And I know we had talked a little earlier about the grant monies available. And that's an example right there where they were able to maximize grant money to upgrade some of their technology within their office. And so I just wanted to highlight that. Thank you.
That's fantastic. Thank you.
All right, let's keep going. What's this next
Yes.
sub-item?
The next sub-item is appraisal, training, and certification presented by Ms. Schultz.
I will now provide a brief report on the BOE's appraisal, training, and certification program. Since our last board meeting, we have taught 2 more virtual classes of our most requested courses. So far, during calendar year 2022, we have taught a total of 8 virtual classes and trained a total of 248 students. This time last year, we taught our first 2 former in-person week-long training courses in a virtual format. Thus, having taught 8 virtual classes this year, we are well on our way to surpassing what we accomplished last year. In addition, BoE staff sent out the annual training needs questionnaire to all 58 county assessors, training coordinators last month in order to provide the BoE with their training needs for the coming 2022-23 fiscal year. BoE staff will be getting together this month to go over those returned questionnaires and determine the training schedule and locations for the upcoming fiscal year. Our plan is to provide some in-person taught classes, some virtually taught classes, and some short 1 to 3 hour virtually taught workshops on specialty topics such as mineral property, California Land Conservation Act properties, and taxable possessory interests. To accomplish this, we plan on utilizing existing BoE training staff and other certified BoE staff from other sections within our office, as well as partnering again with assessor staff that we have certified as BoE trainers to teach our courses. We will also continue to offer our existing online training courses available through American River College and California State University, Sacramento, as well as our online courses available on the BoE's website, plus our self-study training sessions also available on the BoE's website. With this combination of different types of teaching formats being offered and utilizing more staff from other sources, we anticipate being able to surpass the number of courses offered and the number of students taught, not only as compared to last year's numbers of 18 classes and 578 students, but also as compared to the numbers reached in 2019, which were 22 classes and 636 students. This concludes my report on training and certification. I'm available to answer any questions you may have.
Looks like there are no questions. Thank you. Next
Alrighty.
subtext.
Yep. The next sub-item is assessment practices surveys, presented by Ms. Cooper.
Good afternoon, Chair Cohen and honorable board members. I am Holly Cooper, Principal Property Appraiser of the BOE's Assessment Practices Survey Unit. Today, I will be giving you a brief report on the assessment practices surveys. For calendar year 2022, we have issued a total of 3 assessment practices survey reports via letters to assessor for the following counties: Santa Barbara and Alameda counties in District 2 and Sierra County in District 1. In addition to these 3 counties, we are actively working on completing surveys and/or samples for 11 other counties, 6 in District 1, 3 in District 2, 1 in District 3, and 1 in District 4. This includes Stanislaus County in District 1, which was published last week. Due to the recent publication date, it was not included in the Letters to Assessor memo provided by the Assessment Services Unit. However, it will be included in next month's report. The other surveys and/or samples are in various stages of production. Once completed, a copy of the report is provided to each of the board members and their office for preview before it is issued and posted to our website via an LTA. Staff will continue to conduct their surveys and samples remotely for the next 2 months. However, part of our process improvement plan, we will be transitioning our staff over to a more hybrid plan for conducting the surveys and samples for the upcoming 2022-23 fiscal year. As staff begins to travel again, we will go back to conducting our surveys in person. However, we will continue to collect some information remotely as deemed appropriate, as we have found that some things are more efficient and less impactful to the assessor when being collected remotely. We plan to work closely with each assessor and their staff to determine the best way to conduct each survey and how to collect the necessary information in the least impactful way. In addition to implementing this hybrid plan of conducting the surveys and/or samples, BOE staff has implemented other changes to the program, not only to improve inefficiencies, but also to provide more meaningful training to BOE staff. We have refocused our scope on the more core topics of the survey, so BOE senior staff have the ability as subject matter experts to train, develop, and mentor new staff as they come on board. As a result of these process improvements, BOE staff have been able to reduce the total survey and sample production time, which has been a necessity with the reduction of the statutory deadline to issue our findings, going from 2 years, then to 15 months, and now down to 12 months. This has also allowed us to reduce the backlog of surveys and/or samples that we acquired during the COVID-19 pandemic, as we are able to conduct more surveys and/or samples all at the same time. Once our backlog has been completed and staff fully trained to provide more subject matter experts, we will expand the scope of our surveys once again to include the more specialty topics, such as CLCA properties and taxable possessory interest.
I'm sorry, what are CLCA properties?
It is the California Land Conservation Act.
Okay.
This concludes my report on assessment practices surveys. I'm available to answer any questions you may have. Thank you.
Thank you. Do you have a question? Go ahead.
Yeah, it's great to hear that the survey process has been shortened and become more efficient. And that is the result of more hiring within your department? I mean, is that a portion of it, that you have more staff? Or is it a complete rewriting of the survey process?
It's just improving the process plans. We do have staff, but we have some vacancies in surveys to fill.
Okay. Okay, good. Well, that's good news.
Yeah,
Good question.
Thank you, Ms. Cooper. Appreciate it.
welcome.
Mr. Vasquez?
Just a quick one, you know, and as you're mentioning, I was just wondering if you're noticing a good flow, especially with the new hires that are attending some of these statewide, you know, classes that you're talking about earlier.
We do you want to go ahead, or?
Be more than happy to answer.
Thank you.
Thank you. If you're asking about our new hires and how we're folding them in, we are fully aware that in order to have somebody walk in through our door, even with some experience, it's a 2 to 3 year process before they're full journey level and able to function on their own. So we've invested very heavily in our new staff in training, resources, time mentoring with senior staff and our supervisors. So they're folding in really well. We're really happy with the progress we've made. We've picked up a couple of folks that I think will be rising stars. So I think we're doing really well. I hope that's responsive to your question. If not, I'd be more than happy to readdress it.
Now, I figured it's going to be a little bit of a lengthy process, especially with
Yeah.
some of the new ones that are coming from the outside, but
Absolutely.
I was just curious to see how that's going.
No, it's going really well. What we've been able to do is up until about maybe last quarter, we've been having a very good result in our recruitments. So we've been getting some really, not only the quantity of applicants, but the quality of applicants have been improved. So we're hoping to build on that,
Great to hear. Thank you.
of course.
Any other questions, colleagues? Okay, let's continue with the agenda.
The next sub-item is state assessed property, presentation by Mr. McCool.
Good afternoon, Chair Cohen and honorable members. My name is Jack McCool, Chief of the State Assessed Properties Division. Today, I will provide information on the status of ongoing work in our division. The annual state assessee property statements were due on March 1st. Many state assessees requested and were granted extensions to the filing deadline. SAPD staff are diligently working on completing the unitary appraisals, and our staff are currently working at full capacity. We continue to engage with SSC representatives, and we will continue to make ourselves available to discuss issues and meet with assessees as needed. Our Tax Area Services section, also known as TAS, is close to completing processing work for all jurisdictional boundary changes for the current year. TAS has already transmitted process changes to the counties on 2 occasions this year and will shortly be transmitting the final boundary change information as well as the final tax rate area data for the current year. And just as a reminder, each tax rate area comprises a unique combination of revenue districts. TRAs are used primarily by county assessors and county auditors for the allocation, collection, and distribution of property tax revenue in the state. Our tax area services section is responsible for maintaining and reporting all changes to jurisdictional boundaries of revenue districts. Thank you, members. That concludes my report for this month, and as always, I'm available to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. McCool. Colleagues, questions? Nope. All right. Good
All
plan.
righty.
Thank you.
The last sub-item for this item is Welfare Exemption Process Improvement Plan, which will be presented by Ms. Keach.
Good afternoon, Chair Cohen and honorable members of the board. My name is Lauren Keach, and I'm the manager of the Welfare Exemption section of the Property Tax Department. Today, I'll provide you with an update on the Welfare Exemption Supplemental Clearance Certificate Process Improvement Project. Our purpose for the project is to streamline the SCC process for claimants seeking to exempt low-income rental housing from property taxation. We have identified opportunities for improvement and ways to increase efficiency when processing SCC claims. We've completed our examination of the application process. The checklist and claim form were revised and are available on the BoE website for claimants to utilize. The examination process considered common reasons for an incomplete claim that can delay approval and incorporated discussions with taxpayers to provide insight on necessary revisions to accomplish our goal of providing a more clear and user-friendly application process. We will continue to keep record of common reasons involved in incomplete claims following the newly implemented form revisions and make necessary adjustments to ensure the success of this component of the project. Upon completion of the application process, we moved on to our examination of the claims process with the goal of simplifying and modernizing our procedures to increase efficiency. We began with phase 1, which was the review phase, and analyzed each step of the claims reviewing process that's required to grant an SCC, as well as conducted a thorough review of our procedures to identify opportunities for improvement. Then we progressed to phase 2 of the claims process, which was the design plan phase. Our analysis revealed areas in our procedure that are outdated, and we examined ways to update and streamline these areas. We have improved our procedure by transitioning from a paper-driven format to an electronic format for processing claims. We are now in phase 3 of the claims process, which is the execute phase, and have begun phase 1 of the approval process. In our review of the approval process, we are analyzing each step of the claims approval process that's required to grant an SCC and examining our procedures for necessary improvements. We are working toward a solution for claimants to provide documents electronically to relieve the inconvenience and delays caused by mailing and in turn increase efficiency in the approval process. This modernization to our procedure considers direct feedback and suggestions we have received from taxpayers regarding the burdens of mailing claims and supporting documents. I'm glad to report that we are making good progress as staff is working diligently and remain dedicated to this project. Lastly, this project will also include an analysis of our available resources for taxpayers. Currently, our welfare exemption webpage provides general information on filing requirements and frequently asked questions on the welfare exemption and veterans organizations exemption, but we believe further review and revisions of the webpage are warranted to provide more information regarding the application process as well as the filing requirements. We also plan to expand our current FAQs on our website to provide more questions and answers that are specifically related to supplemental clearance certificates. This part of the project will be tackled once we've completed our review, plan, and execution of the application, claims, and approval processes of the SCC project. And as we move forward with this project, we will continue to provide updates and information regarding our progress and improvements to allow for visibility into the process and ensure that the board members are kept informed. Members, this concludes my presentation, and I'm available to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Ms. Keach. Colleagues, any questions for Ms. Keach? Mr. Vasquez? Mr. Gaines?
Just one quick one. Thank you for the report, and I was just wondering, as you were gathering consensus on, especially on these issues recommended for changes, what were some of the issues that were consistent coming from the stakeholders?
Some of the consistent issues were the incomplete claims that we receive. So having to amend documents and resubmit documents, and then the frequent requests for expediting and those delays that are caused in incomplete claims. So that's really the main focus, how to streamline these areas with the overall goal of this project.
Do you think some of the trouble was in terms of the electronic format? How much of that might have played into this thing? Because I know some of the counties are having still a tough time with the technology.
You mean the updated electronic
updated-
format?
updated.
The electronic format is mostly updated internally as far as
Oh.
our processing the claims electronically to increase efficiency and processing on our end, but the forms are still completed and submitted in the mail as of this point.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Gaines?
Yeah, thank you, Ms. Keach, with your presentation. Appreciate it. And because I've had a few complaints historically with these welfare exemptions and nonprofits trying to get their applications filled out correctly. But it sounds like, that's changing because it's going electronic. I guess those are internal electronic changes? It's
Correct,
not user,
yes.
it's not a electronic user base or something of that nature. And that the backlog, my recollection is the backlog is improving.
Yes, we
Is
are
that right?
improving the backlog, and that's part of this process as well. And
Great.
we're speeding up the processing on our end, which in turn improves the backlog.
Good. And how about staffing I don't know if that should go through the director or not, but are you properly staffed in your department in terms of getting the workload done?
I'm happy to report we are constantly filling vacancies, and we've had recent promotions with the unit, so we're happy to retain staff and see them work their way up in the unit and increase their knowledge. So I'm
Good.
trying to bring new staff in and continue to promote them within.
Wonderful. That's great. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Ms. Shetty?
We're ready to take public comment on these items. We have not received any requests for any in-person speaker, and no written comments have been received on this item. We will be going to the AT&T moderator. AT&T moderator, please let us know if there's anyone on the line who'd like to make a public comment regarding these items at this time.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, if you would like to make a public comment at this time, please press 1, then 0 on your touch-tone phone. Once again, if you would like to make a comment, please press 1, then 0 on your touch-tone phone. And again, ladies and gentlemen, if you wish to make a comment, please press 1, then 0. At this time, I have no one queuing up.
Our next item is K4A, Legislative Research and Statistics Division's Chief Report, Legislative Issues, Update on the Administrative and Program-Related Legislative Bills Impacting the BoE. This item will be presented by Mr. Weatherby.
So good afternoon, Chair Cohen, Vice Chair Schaefer, and honorable members of the board. I'm Dustin Weatherby. I'm Chief of the Legislative Research and Statistics Division. So board members, prior to moving to the PAN attachment, I will highlight a few upcoming legislative deadlines and the next steps for the legislative budget process. The legislature reconvened last week from the annual spring recess and have begun legislative work. There are several legislative deadlines coming up for the month of May, but I'm only going to highlight a couple of the upcoming deadlines. A complete list of legislative deadlines in May are included in the weekly legislative summary emailed to your office. The first legislative deadline is this Friday, April 29th, which is the Policy Committee deadline for fiscal bills introduced in their House. Next is the May 6th Policy Committee deadline for non-fiscal bills introduced in their House, and ultimately the May 27th House of Origin deadline for bills introduced in their House in 2022. Another significant legislative item is the upcoming May budget revision. As you know, the governor introduced the state's proposed 22-23 fiscal year budget in January. Soon, the governor will release a new proposed budget called the May revision, which considers new revenue figures and cost estimates based on the latest economic forecast, changes in population, and expenditures for programs. The May revision is traditionally released from early to mid-May and is the starting point for budget negotiations between the administration and the legislature. The legislature will then begin the budget hearing shortly after the release through the month of May, and the legislature must pass the budget by midnight on June 15th. And then typically, the governor has 12 working days to sign the budget bill. If any substantive statutory law must be amended in order to implement the budget, then these statutory changes must be approved by the legislature and are included in pieces of legislation known as budget trailer bills. These items typically trail the main budget that has been signed by the governor. So board members, I'm going to move on to the PAN attachment, which includes a summary of the legislation affecting the Board of Equalization that is still pending the legislature. To date, no bills have been introduced or amended relating to the implementation of Proposition 19. The only measure pending is Assembly Constitutional Amendment 9 by Assemblymember Kevin Kiley, which seeks to repeal several provisions of Proposition 19 regarding intergenerational base year transfer exemptions and instead reinstate the prior rule. This bill has not been referred to committee, and the last day for the legislature to place a measure on the November 2022 general election ballot is June 30th. And then over the past months, the BoE has collaborated with the California Department of Tax and Fee Administration to include a 5-year sunset extensions for the alcoholic beverage tax offer and compromise program, and the proposed language will be included in the CDTFA offer and compromise omnibus bill. Currently, this language is not in print, so it's not listed on the PAN in front of you. So the first bill I want to highlight is Senate Bill 1494 by the Senate Governance and Finance Committee, which contains one of the board's sponsored legislative proposals to amend Revenue and Taxation Code Section 97.68 relating to a sales tax augmentation fund to correct references of Board of Equalization to the California Department of Tax and Fee Administration. The bill passed the Senate Governance and Finance Committee on April 20th and is currently on the Senate's consent calendar. The next bill is Assembly Bill 1206 by Assemblymember Bennett, which will require that a rental unit continue to be treated as occupied by a lower income household when the income of those occupants increases up to 140% of the area's median income, if the owner is a community land trust whose land is leased to low-income households for fiscal years 2022-23 through 27-28. The board voted at the February board meeting to support AB 1206. The bill passed the Assembly January 31st and is still pending a referral to a Senate committee. The final bill I want to highlight is Assembly Bill 1733 by Assemblymember Quirk, which will provide the flexibility for state agencies to hold meetings via teleconference, and it has been double referred to the Assembly Governmental Organization Committee and the Assembly Business and Professions Committee. The bill was set for hearing on April 20th in the Assembly GO Committee, but it was removed from the committee's agenda. The bill was double referred and must pass both committees by the April 29th Policy Committee deadline for fiscal bills. So this will conclude my presentation on this item, and I'm available to take any questions you may have. Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you for your report, your updates. I was just, my question is regarding AB 1933, the Freeman Bill. And I understand the bill will expand the welfare exemption to owner-occupied residents sold only to low-income, first-time homebuyers, provided the property is owned and operated by a nonprofit corporation that is organized to build and rehabilitate residents, subject to a 45-year record agreement per section 214.15.1. Have we or other agencies produced any data estimating how many homebuyers would benefit under this bill if it was to pass?
Thank you for that question, board member. So the BoE doesn't have any data specific to how many units would be created. In the legislative analysis of AB 1933 that was just released this morning, the bill sponsors did provide us with some data on 11 developments that they produced in Los Angeles County. And then staff went through those 11 developments and chose 3 developments that applied only to low-income households. and then kind of provided a revenue estimate based upon if that bill was in effect, how many, what would the local property tax estimate be? But there's no data out there that we can forecast on how many units would be created.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions on this side, on my left? No? The AB 1206 Bennett Affordable Housing, although we voted to pass it last month, I'm wondering what happens. So a family, basically, once they hit the 140 AMI threshold, are they forced out of the unit and have to find some housing someplace else?
So no. So what would happen is the developer, the nonprofit that owns the housing, they would be denied the welfare exemption from applying to that unit. So if
Okay, hold on. So how do we prevent or discourage the developers from pushing out that tenant
I
and
don't,
creating displacement?
I can't speak to that, as that's a local issue when it comes to county assessors and administering the exemption. But when it comes towards, forcing tenants out of housing, that's not within the jurisdiction here at the BoE. So I don't know if we can have any sort of fix on that.
I'm not looking necessarily to have a fix, and I understand it's not necessarily in the jurisdiction, but anything that we set into motion, right? For every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. I just want to make sure that we're not inadvertently creating or exacerbating the homeless crisis. But I see that I should probably contact the sponsor of the bill to ask, they would have the level of detail that I'm asking.
Yeah, the exemption itself would only be denied to the actual taxpayer, but the individual that's living in the unit wouldn't be forced out of the unit.
Right,
For example, if
understood.
you think of an example where you have maybe a 4-member household and it's, 2 kids and one of the partners gets a job and then they go over that 140% income, what's going to happen is when the audit is done on that particular taxpayer and the county assessor comes back and sees that of, let's say, 50% of the units were rented to below 140%, and there's a couple that went above, they just remove the exemption from the tax from applying to those units. So then the taxpayer would just pay an additional tax on it.
Right, I understand that, but I also understand a little bit about how the affordable housing world also works, and they wouldn't be too happy to be paying taxes on units that they anticipated on paying either no or very low taxes on. So I'm wondering if they would develop some kind of internal policy or policy that would move people on. This is not an answer. This is not a question that I expect you to have the answer to. It's more like a rhetorical question on my part. Just wanted to see if maybe you could point me in the direction of the answer. But I think what I'll do is just go back to the sponsor and talk to the sponsor.
I would say the bill sponsor or the
Yeah.
legislature, as
Yeah.
they have the policy implications and the considerations to make there.
Perfect. Who else is supporting this? What is this, AB 1206? Where else does the support lie?
To be honest, I have not looked at the support list for the legislative analysis that was released by the committee.
Was it long and exhaustive, or was it just, you just don't recall?
I just don't recall off the
Okay.
top of my head.
All right, perfect. All right, thank you. I appreciate your presentation, very thorough, thoughtful. Yes, Senator.
Just to clarify on the exemption itself, can you encapsulate what happens to the exemption as a result of the legislation? It increases, does it not, so that there's more potential candidates that can qualify for a unit within an apartment complex?
Yeah, correct. So for other entities that aren't CLTs, there's already that 140% AMI income limit for tenants. So this particular bill just brings parity to CLTs in the welfare exemption for renting. So if this bill was to be signed, if a CLT has a bunch of tenants who meet the qualifications above 80%, but below that 140%, they would qualify for that exemption. And
Okay.
so when it gets, when the county assessors come back through and start to administer the exemption, those units that would qualify would be eligible for the exemption, which would then, reduce the tax liability that the taxpayer would have.
Okay, so speaking to the question of the chair, at least on one aspect of it, if you were at 80% and the exemption increased to 140, you would prevent disruption of someone having to move out of their unit as a result of the passage of this legislation. Am I understanding that clearly? If it went from 80 to 140?
That's for the income of the household. That's not necessarily for the exemption. So
Okay,
if the household income increases from 80% of the AMI to 140%, they're now going to qualify for the exemption. So it
Right.
expands it in that way.
right.
Once a tenant, if they were to go beyond that 140%, I don't know if there's anything in the legislative language that would prevent a current CLT from, quote unquote, evicting that tenant. I think
Right.
that's, I think that's a policy consideration that the legislature will have to contemplate.
That's right, okay, all right. But it would help those in that in-between threshold that are above 80.
Yeah,
Below
the
140.
exemption for the taxpayer would apply in between that 80 to 140%.
Right.
Correct.
Which should ultimately help tenants. Because of the exemptions given to the taxpayer, which would be the owner of the apartment complex,
Correct.
right? They'd be able to provide more units to folks in that category. I'm just trying to clarify it in my mind. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I think we can move on. Thank you.
We're ready to take our public comments. We have not received a request for any in-person speaker and no written comments on this item, but we will be going to the AT&T moderator. AT&T moderator, please let me know if there's anyone on the line who would like to make a public comment concerning this item.
Thank you. And once again, ladies and gentlemen, if you'd like to make a public comment, please press 1, then 0 at this time. Once again, if you'd like to make a comment, please press 1, then 0 at this time. Currently, I have no one in queue.
Great, thank you very much. Let's call the next item.
The next item is K5A, Taxpayers' Rights Advocate Office Report, Operational Update, update on activities of the Taxpayer Rights Advocate Office, including Proposition 19, education and outreach, and other matters. This matter will be presented by Ms. Wing.
Good afternoon, Chair Cohen and honorable board members. My name is Margie Wing, Senior Specialist Property Appraiser in the Taxpayer Rights Advocate Office. I'm here to provide you with an update on the activities of the Taxpayer Rights Advocate Office and Proposition 19 and outreach, education and outreach to keep you informed. Our agency's advocate, Lisa Thompson, extends her apologies for not being able to attend today as she is attending a Assessors Association conference. First, I would like to share with you some statistics on the number of taxpayers' cases completed by the Taxpayer Rights Advocate Office last month and provide some insight on the types of cases we handled. In March 2022, we completed 22 cases. 4 were in Board Member Gaines District 1, 11 in Board Member Cohen's District 2, 3 were in Board Member Vasquez's District 3, and 4 were in Board Member Schaefer's District 4. Of the 22 cases completed, 4 were from the administrative category and 18 were in the valuation category. The administrative category includes topics such as creating and mailing tax bills, refunds, penalty cancellation, defaulted taxes, access to data, special assessments, and direct levies on the property tax bill. The valuation category includes topics such as change in ownership, declines in values, appraisal methodology, exclusions, exemptions, new construction, actual enrollment of values, general property taxation, and assessment appeals. With respect to the 4 cases in the administrative category, 1 case involved defaulted or delinquent property taxes, 2 pertained to creating and mailing tax bills, and one involved penalty cancellation. We assisted the taxpayers by coordinating with the tax collector's office regarding their payments, providing information on the laws requiring tax collector's office to add penalties if payment are not made timely, as well as information about penalty cancellation request. For the taxpayers with defaulted taxes, we help them understand the availability of payment plans before taxes have been delinquent for 5 years, and the laws requiring a tax collector to sell property if taxes were defaulted for more than 5 years. Our office also provided information on what the taxpayer needed to do in order to redeem the property to avoid having the property sold at a tax sale auction. With respect to the valuation category and its 18 cases in total, 3 pertained to change in ownership. 5 cases addressed exclusions from reassessment, in which 3 pertained to the base year value transfer exclusion for persons age 55 and over, 1 for the base year value transfer for disaster relief, and 1 case pertained to the parent-child exclusion. 5 cases involved exemptions. 3 pertained to the welfare exemption, 1 pertained to the homeowner's exemption, and 1 pertained to the disabled veterans exemption. 2 cases pertained to the actual enrollment of values. 1 case involved general property taxation, and 2 pertained to assessment appeals. For the change in ownership cases, the TRA office provided information about what a change in ownership means for California tax purposes, what types of transfers can result in a change in ownership for property tax purposes, and how assessors become aware of transfers through recorded documents. Additionally, we provided information explaining how transfers of ownership interest in a legal entity, such as a corporation, can result in reassessment of the entity's real property. In 1 case, we coordinated with the assessor's office to understand why its office reassessed the property for a change in ownership 20 years ago instead of a more recent transfer. The assessor's office indicated that while examining a current affidavit of death for one of the partners in a partnership, it was discovered that there was a previous death for one of the partners that caused a change in ownership of the partnership under Revenue and Taxation Code 64D. We reviewed the information to confirm a reassessable change occurred and provided information to the taxpayer to help them understand the impact of transfers of ownership interest in a legal entity and the importance of to timely report transfers of legal entities that result in a change in control or ownership in accordance to the law. Additionally, we provide information on the statute of limitations for escape assessments. With respect to the 4 cases involving base year value transfers, 3 pertain to the laws in place currently under Proposition 19, and 1 was under the prior law due to the transaction date. 3 of these cases were for base year value transfers for persons aged 55 and over, with the other case being a base year value transfer due to disaster. In 1 case, the taxpayer purchased their intended replacement property and sold their original before the April 1, 2021 effective date of Proposition 19. So in order to qualify for a base year value transfer, they would have needed to meet the qualifications under Proposition 90 and Revenue and Taxation Code 69.5. Unfortunately, they did not qualify because the property was located in a county that did not have an ordinance in place accepting the base year value transfers from other counties. The TRA office explained the requirements of the base year value transfer provisions of Proposition 60 and 90 that were in place prior to the April 1, 2021 effective date of Proposition 19, as well as the provisions for a base year value transfer under Proposition 19. We helped the taxpayer understand that there were only 10 counties in the state allowing inter-county transfers, that is, those from other counties, under Section 69.5. We also advised the taxpayer that if they wanted to take advantage of the base year value transfer provisions of Proposition 19, they could buy another property as long as it was within 2 years of the sale of their original property. In another case, the taxpayer was concerned about the timing of processing their application for base year value transfer under Proposition 19 because they needed to pay the property taxes on the higher value while waiting for the assessor's office to process their base year value transfer claim. We explained to the taxpayer that although Proposition 19 was approved by the voters in November 2020, implementing legislation for Proposition 19 was not passed until September 30, 2021, and that most assessors' offices had a high volume of claims. We explained that the amount on the 2021 property tax bill represents the property's assessed value as of the January 1 lien date, which was that of the prior owners, and that rule change cannot be changed. We explained that once the base year value claim is approved, the assessor would issue a negative supplemental assessment for the difference between the amount on the assessment roll and the amount determined to be the new taxable value on the current roll, on the replacement property, considering the factored base year value transferred from the original property and any excess market value of the replacement property that is over the original property. The assessor would then transmit information to the county auditor's office to adjust the second installment of the tax bill or refund amounts paid. Additionally, we advised the taxpayer that we had coordinated with the assessor's office to confirm receipt of the base year value claim and checked on the status of its processing. We helped the taxpayer understand that there are additional steps that must be taken when the original property is located in a different county than the replacement property. And the replacement county must obtain a value certification from the other county to obtain the original property's factored base year value and its market value for the date of sale. Because the assessor's office said they were just now processing the claim, we suggested the taxpayer wait to pay their second installment closer to the delinquency date, and that it was possible that the tax bill would be adjusted by then, so the taxpayer should review the tax collector's information online before submitting payment. The third base year value case involved demonstration that the taxpayer was living in the original property as a principal residence within 2 years of the purchase of the replacement. We helped the taxpayer understand that it was not required that the original property had to be granted the homeowner's exemption, but that it had to be eligible for it, and provided information as to the various ways the taxpayer can demonstrate to the assessor that they were living in the property within 2 years of buying the replacement property. With respect to the fourth and last base year value case, it pertained to a taxpayer's denial of a base year value application from a property destroyed in Butte County's Paradise Fire to a property he purchased in neighboring Glenn County. We looked into the situation and determined that he made the purchase before Glenn County had adopted an ordinance accepting base year value transfers from other counties under Proposition 110. We explained the requirements to qualify for the base year value transfer, and that although Glenn County had adopted an ordinance accepting disaster base year value transfers from other counties, unfortunately, it was not effective until after the taxpayer had purchased the property. We further explained that if he decided to rebuild the property on the same site of his former home that had been destroyed in the fire, or buy another home in Butte County within 5 years of the disaster, he would qualify for a base year value transfer under the disaster provisions. The final exclusion case pertained to the parent-child exclusion. In this case, the taxpayer had inherited property as a result of her mother's death, but she was not aware she needed to advise the assessor of the change in ownership within 150 days of the date of death, and record the affidavit of death into the title of the property and file a claim to receive the exclusion from reassessment under the parent-child exclusion. The assessor's office reassessed the property, which resulted in a substantial increase in the property's assessed value and generated 2 years of increased taxes, one for the supplemental assessment and one for the escape assessment. The taxpayer was worried about not being able to pay her property taxes and stay in the home. We coordinated with the assessor's office on processing of this taxpayer's parent-child exclusion, and they submitted the necessary paperwork to the auditor's office to reverse the supplemental and escape assessments. With respect to the 3 welfare exemption cases, we assisted the taxpayers by coordinating with the assessor's office where the property was located regarding its processing of the welfare exemption claim, or coordinating with our agency's property tax department regarding the organization's organizational clearance certificate application. For one of the cases, we helped the taxpayer understand why certain documents must be submitted with an OCC claim, and that an assessor cannot grant the welfare exemption on an organization's property unless it holds a valid OCC by the State Board of Equalization. The remaining 2 exemption cases involve the homeowner's exemption and disabled veterans exemption. The TRA office helped the taxpayers by explaining the requirements of the exemptions, when they must be filed, and how to view property information online through the assessor's office or tax collector's office to review the property's assessed value each year and the amount of exemption applied to reduce the property's assessed value. Additionally, for the disabled veterans exemption case, we helped the taxpayer understand that the disabled veterans exemption did not apply to a child of the deceased disabled veteran, and the law only applied to the unmarried surviving spouse of a deceased disabled veteran. We explained in order to extend the disabled veterans exemption to a child, it would require a change to the California Constitution as well as statutory changes. As to the cases for enrollment of values and general property taxation, 2 involved valuation issues and the other involved a taxpayer wanting relief from property taxes. In one of these cases, the taxpayer contacted our office with concerns that the assessor had overvalued the property due to the incorrect square footage after new construction occurred. We coordinated with the assessor's office and explained to the taxpayer that they could request the assessor's office to do a physical inspection of the property, and then they would review the value. In another case, the taxpayer disagreed that the assessor could enroll escape assessments on a partial interest transfer that occurred more than a decade ago. We confirmed that the assessor's office could go back and correct the base year value, and that although it could not enroll the supplemental assessment, the law required issuance of escape assessments for a certain number of years within the statute of limitations, and that's 4 years. In the case where the taxpayer not wanting to pay property taxes because she was a senior and looking for relief from property taxes, we explained that the law did not allow for property to be exempt because it is owned by a person of a particular age. We provided the taxpayer with a summary information on the property tax postponement program administered by the State Controller's Office, and where she could find further details on it if she was having financial hardship. The remaining case pertained to assessment appeals. We assisted one taxpayer by providing information on County Assessment Appeals Board decisions and our agency's role regarding local appeals. We also explained the recourse that the taxpayer has if they disagree with a local Assessment Appeals Board decision. With respect to the other case, we coordinated with the county clerk of the Board of Supervisors regarding an appeal application that was initially determined to be invalid. The issue was later resolved with the appeal application being reinstated.
May I ask a question, Ms. Wing? Is there some way in the future you could provide a written report for us so that we can just read it prior to the meeting, and then if we have questions, go over them with you, instead of just kind of going through this long reading of a summary?
Well, I will discuss that with my manager, Lisa Thompson.
Okay. So, Ms. Thompson, Ms. Stowers, do you want to say something?
Yes, excuse me, Madam Chair. We had a conversation about that just yesterday.
Okay.
And I'm going to be working with Ms. Thompson to see how we could provide something in writing, whether it be prior to the meeting. It may be a report to you individually,
Yes,
as opposed to posted on the page.
Yeah, I think that would be more beneficial, and then it will allow us to absorb what you're presenting to us, think about it, and then come back with either questions or follow-up feedback. I think, colleagues, you would agree with that, as opposed to just receiving a very detailed report. So, with that said, Ms. Wing, I don't know how much more you have to present, but just in the future, communicate to Ms. Thompson. It'd be best if we had something prior, be able to read, digest, and think about, and then she would be here to answer follow-up questions.
Absolutely.
I don't think, if the taxpayer is delighted with what we're doing, I don't think we have to know all about that. I think we're more concerned about where the taxpayer is unhappy at how they're being treated, and they have a position, and we have a position, and maybe that position ought to come to our level. But everything I hear is happiness, and, we don't have that much time.
Okay, no happiness over here. We only want to hear complaints. No, but all seriousness, though, I think that what my colleague is really saying is that there would be a preference just to have the report made to us so that we can know what's going on. So I'm going to pause on the rest of the report. Are there anything high level that stands out that we do need to know about?
Well, as far as the case is concerned, I'm done with that.
Okay.
My next portion of the presentation will be on the taxpayer Proposition 19 education and outreach.
Okay, perfect. Let's
So
go ahead.
that's a
and-
short.
Okay, let's go ahead and jump there.
Okay.
Thank you, Ms. Wing. Thanks for being so accommodating.
All right, so the next item is our work on the associated with Proposition 19 education and outreach for taxpayers. With respect to information on Proposition 19, the TRA office worked with Communications Officer Mr. Peter Kim to revise Proposition 19 fact sheet that was issued in February 2021 to reflect the implementing legislation and the letter to assessors issued by the Property Tax Department concerning Proposition 19's implementing legislation. I am pleased to inform you that the revised Proposition 19 fact sheet was completed and it was posted to our website on April 14, 2022, on the same day it was advertised on social media. With respect to the education specific to each area within Proposition 19, the TRA office plans to issue an information sheet addressing each of the various intergenerational exclusion and base year value transfer provisions of Proposition 19. The TRA office has completed work on new information sheets for the parent-child exclusion and the grandparent-grandchild exclusion under Prop 19, as well as made changes to the existing information sheets addressing transfers that occurred before February 16, 2021, the effective date for Proposition 19's intergenerational exclusion provisions. Once our Forms and Publications section puts these 4 information sheets in final format and makes them accessible, they will be posted to our agency's website. Additionally, the TRA office drafted new information sheets for the base year value transfers for persons age 55 and older and for disabled persons under Proposition 19, as well as revising the existing publications to identify them as applicable to transfers prior to April 1, 2021. These information sheets will be sent to our Forms and Publications section to place them in final format once the internal review process is completed. Our agency's advocate, Lisa Thompson, is communicating with the president of the California Assessors Association to advise the association about the issuance of the information sheets so assessors and their staff are aware of the resource available to their taxpayers. Ms. Thompson is also coordinating with our agency's communications officer so that social media posts are made to inform the public about information sheets that are issued specific to the intergenerational exclusion and base year value transfer provisions of Proposition 19. At future board meetings, the TRA office will provide further updates on this to keep you informed. Members, that concludes my update, thankfully. I am available to answer any questions.
Thank you. Let's see, anything on my right? Any questions? Go ahead.
More of a comment.
Comment?
One, to thank you for this in-depth presentation, and to let Lisa, I'm sure she'll listen to this, that you did a great job. I know
Thank
she's
you.
out attending a conference on our behalf, so I appreciate you stepping in.
Thank you.
Thank you. Let's see on my left. Mr. Gaines?
Just a comment. Thank you for the presentation. We appreciate it. But I think the input from my colleague, Mr. Schaefer, and from the chair are good ones in terms of if we can be more concise in the public presentation and get the details written to it, so we can review those prior to the meeting. I did want to make a comment. It sounded to me that of the 22 cases, were there 4 that were related to Prop 14? Did I,
Prop 19?
or Prop 19, excuse me?
Yeah, I believe so.
Yeah, okay, that's, I just
Yeah.
found that interesting.
We do have a lot of questions on Prop 19 still.
Yes, very well, thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. Let's go.
Ready to take a
Public
public
comment?
comment?
Yes.
We have not received a request for any in-person speaker and no written comments on this item, but we will go to the AT&T moderator. AT&T moderator, please let us know if there's anyone on the line who would like to make a public comment regarding this matter.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, if you'd like to make a public comment, please press 1, then 0 at this time. Once again, that's 1, 0 if you'd like to make a public comment. At this time, I have no one in queue.
All right, thank you. Thank you for your presentation. Let's continue.
Yep. The next item is L2A, Board Member Initiatives, Board Member Strategic Plan, Board Discussion and Possible Action on the following items pertaining to the current Board Member Strategic Plan. Quarterly reports on priorities, actions, and progress related to the following goals. Goal 1, obtain survey reports on resources, infrastructure to fulfill agency workload and board member workload. Goal 2, identify board workload priorities to achieve statewide objectives for stakeholders. Goal 3, outline current parameters for an education and outreach plan. Goal 4, collaborate with executive director to develop scope of work on branding campaign. This matter will be presented by Chair Cohen and Mr. Vasquez.
All right, thank you very much. So I'm going to yield to Board Member Vasquez. You ready? You ready? You want to kick this off?
I was looking at this report, or I guess the graph, the layout here. I think it's a pretty self-explanatory. I know people just are barely receiving it for the first time. So I was just kind of going to open it up and see if there's any questions, especially on the duties and responsibilities that we all signed up for, because some of this was done going back to a little over a year ago.
Okay. Well, let me just try to frame this up a little bit
Sure.
before we go any further, just for those of you that have forgotten about what exactly we're talking about here. So, many years ago, Board Member Vasquez kicked off and initiated a board strategic plan. And when we developed the strategic plan, we identified key steps that we needed to take to rebuild the agency and to restore its natural national stellar reputation. And wanted to just take a minute and recognize that it was Board Member Vasquez and the colleagues and I, that we all remained committed to working collectively with the executive director and now the new executive director and the executive team that is growing to make sure that we are achieving these goals. So this particular time on the agenda, I wanted to use for our quarterly progress report. And Mr. Vasquez, I was under the impression that you were going to provide us some highlights today.
I will.
Okay, all right, there we go. You can go ahead, take it.
Let me do that. First of all, just wanted to thank members, and especially the chair, on this issue as we laid it out some time back. But just to kind of hopefully set at least some an update here. I am pleased to present our first quarterly report on our progress and actions related to our four strategic plan goals. Because we only had a few weeks to work on this since the last meeting, my report will be brief, but at least we can determine what has been completed and where the remaining work needs to be done. Since by our next report, hopefully in the end of July, I believe we'll see a significantly more progress, especially on some of these points. I will proceed with each goal and identify our progress to date. Please feel free to add anything that I may have missed or if there's some clarification needed. The first goal is to obtain survey reports on resources and infrastructures to fulfill agencies' workload and board members' workload. The surveys and reports are still in progress. More information will be available, and coordination with the executive director and our new executive director, specifically on this one, is forthcoming. The second goal is to identify the board workload priorities to achieve statewide objectives for stakeholders. Work on this goal 2A is still in the process. However, on our January 29th meeting in 2020, we adopted the new board meeting agenda template that included new guidelines for determining board agenda items L and M in order to vet emerging issues and public policy actions. Therefore, all actions under Goal 2B have been completed. Moving down to Goal 3, the outlined current parameters for an education and outreach plan. And Member Cohen, I'm sure, will add something to this down the road, but let me just say that to expand and strengthen the property tax knowledge and compliance for taxpayers, businesses, nonprofits, veterans, and other stakeholders is still in the process. Goal 3B, establish outreach and communication guidelines, including guidelines for members, interaction with the taxpayers' rights advocates, is complete. In the board's work on the governance policy, the executive director published the Operation Memo number 001, Communications Protocol for the Board of Equalization members and their staff with the BoE Executive Management Team. On January 14, 2021, which the board incorporated into the governance policy publication 471. And then I'll move into goal number 4, collaborate with the executive director to develop scope of work on the branding campaign. And goal 4A was to launch a 3-year branding campaign, partially completed, and Member Gaines and Member Schaefer were working on this to develop a baseline for the BoE brand established by coordination between member offices and the BoE. They met with a consultant from USC Price School for branding campaign projects, including group discussions on needs, structure, history, and member offices, and more. And then just in the wrap-up, I would say, members, I just wanted to thank you all for your feedback, your work that you've done so far. And as we can see, we are moving forward, but please feel free to ask staff or to send any progress updates to my office at any time so we can continue to add. And as we come back at our future meeting, probably if not sooner, by July, I have a more in-depth progress report on some of these goals and items. And with that, let me just turn it back over to my chair.
All right, great. Thank you very much. Appreciate that report out. And like I said earlier, we still remain committed to the development and then, of course, the implementation of these identified goals, and working with the team, the executive team, as well as the executive director, to continue to work on our board strategic plan. My staff has submitted everything, all the documents, should people want to read our remarks. And let's see, colleagues down on this end on my left, do you have anything else to add? Yes? No? No? Okay.
I think Tony gave a good synopsis on branding.
Okay.
We're meeting with USC and we're still in progress.
Okay.
So,
You're
thank
meeting with
you.
USC. Okay, great. Has it been a challenge to get a meeting scheduled?
No, they've been occurring, yeah. So
Okay.
we're fine.
All right, great.
Thank
Thank you. All right, Will, let's take public comment. Thank you.
We have not received a request for any in-person presentation and no written comments on this item. We will go to the AT&T moderator. AT&T moderator, please let us know if there's anyone on the line who'd like to make a public comment regarding this item.
Thank you. Once again, ladies and gentlemen, if you would like to make a public comment, please press 1, then 0 at this time. Once more, that's 1, 0 if you'd like to make a public comment. At this time, I have no one in queue.
All right, thank you.
All righty. The next item is M1, Public Policy Hearings, Discussion on the Implementation of Proposition 19, the Home Protection for Seniors, Severely Disabled Families, and Victims of Wildfire or Natural Disasters Act of 2020. There are no staff reports or external speakers for this agenda item for this month's meeting. However, persons who wish to address the board on this topic as a public comment may do so.
And again, so this is just an opportunity, this is an item that we place on the agenda that allows us a placeholder and a space for people to talk, ask questions, have any kind of discussion. Let's see if there's any public comment.
We have not received any requests for in-person speakers, but we have received a written comment on this item.
Great.
I will go to the AT&T moderator first and then read the comment into the record.
Okay.
AT&T moderator, do we have anyone on the line who'd like to make a public comment on this matter?
Thank you. Once again, ladies and gentlemen, if you would like to make a public comment, please press 1, then 0 at this time. Once again, that's 1, 0 if you'd like to make a public comment. At this time, I have no comments in queue.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Please read the public comment.
Yes, the public comment was received from Vaughn McGuire on April 18th, 2022. Hello. I have serious concerns about the dramatic effect that Prop 19 will have on small rental property owners and their respective tenants. I continually hear the phrase affordable housing throughout California, and yet I do not find the referenced housing housing to ever be particularly affordable. The one area where it still does largely exist is in areas with stringent rent controls like San Francisco and Santa Monica that incentivize tenants to stay for long periods because the cities have severe caps on the amounts that rents can be raised each year. I almost think of these cities as having a mechanism that functions almost as it would for property owners covered under Prop 13, in that it keeps their rent payments safe from large escalations as long as the tenants do not move. A wide swath of the housing in San Francisco that was built prior to 1986 falls into this category. It's the only affordable housing that tenants have in SF. My family is one of those small property owners. We've owned a duplex in SF for 36 years, and Prop 19 stands to drive our family out of business, while likely displacing our low-rent tenants. Our current tenants have been with us for 27 years and pay roughly 50% market rate rent due to the limitations that the SF Rent Board sets on the amounts that we can raise rents each year. We think it's great. We actually do provide affordable housing and have been for decades. We've been able to do this solely because Prop 13 has provided us a stable tax base that allows us to continue to operate despite the very small annual rent increases. The removal of Prop 58 stands to unwind the relationship between our family's stable tax base and our tenants' stable rent. When our duplex is transferred from parent to child, the assessed value will rise roughly 250 to 300% on the day of our parent's death, while leaving us with no ability to raise the rent. This will force us out of business immediately, which has already happened to small property owners all over SF since Prop 19 went into effect. After we're forced out of business, the new owners will likely purchase the property with the idea of doing a owner move-in evictions or potentially doing a full Ellis Act, which will displace both tenants. Realtors have confirmed this for me. I've asked them why people are willing to buy properties with very low rent tenants. Every realtor has responded similarly. Their intent is to displace the tenants so they can live in the units or go out of business completely while replacing the current structure with something larger. Either way, the tenants are gone. I paraphrase a bit. 41% of the rentable units in California are owned by mom and pop. All rental properties stand to be fully reassessed back to market after the parent's death under Prop 19. As the heirs inherit these properties, it stands to be problematic for both tenants and heirs. At best, tenants in light rent-controlled environments will feel the squeeze from their heir, while the others keep rents maximized to offset their high property tax bills. Worst case, areas like SF with stringent rent controls will see small property owners and their respective tenants forced out. There were 0 hearings held before the legislature green-light Prop 19 onto the 2020 ballot. This is absolutely insane. Not only will Prop 19 force some non-high income earners out of the family home, but also stand to upend large segments of the rental market over the next several decades for both small rental property owners and their respective tenants. Please help. Thanks, Vaughn McGuire.
Thank you, Vaughn McGuire. Yes, go ahead. Okay.
Yeah,
Mr.
I just wanted to make a quick comment.
Okay.
First of all, I wanted to thank Mr. McGuire for taking the time to provide us with his written comment on the impact of Prop 19 on the owners and tenants for rental property in California. What he has described is a little bit concerning, though, because in light of the continuing shortage of affordable housing and the high numbers of household people throughout the state, that are houseless, basically, and if in his comments, or in his written comments, he states that he's the owner of a duplex. I know in Santa Monica, a duplex is exempt, so a mom and pop wouldn't be penalized on the rent control. It actually doesn't fall under the rent control. And if he lives in a triplex, it's also exempt. But being an absentee landlord, if it's just a duplex, it wouldn't take effect. Now, I know he mentions in San Francisco. I don't know if it's different in San Francisco, but at least in Santa Monica.
It's always different in San Francisco.
I know it is.
It's a different place.
So, but moving forward, I would suggest, if he's listening, or if we can get back to him, I think he needs to reach out to his legislative representative, especially for the Bay Area, and discuss this issue moving forward, because at the end of the day, it's all about trying to keep these units as affordable as possible, especially for the renters and seniors. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. It's interesting. You heard, the speaker's name was Vaughn McGuire? Vaughn McGuire. You heard it as a man. I heard it as a woman. I don't know. Maybe I don't know. That's just it's an ambiguous name. But I am really delighted that that the person took the time to write with such great detail. And this is exactly why we keep items like this on the agenda, so that we can receive this ongoing feedback and be aware as it continues to inform us as we live with this this legislation and the implementation of it. So I have no further comments. I think Senator Gaines had something to share.
Yeah, thank you. I really appreciate the constituents' comments, and there was a fix moving forward. I know that the Howard Jarvis Taxpayers Association was gathering signatures for an initiative that would implement, I think it was Prop 58 and 130, but basically it was addressing this aspect of the parent-child, grandparent-grandchild exemption and putting it back into place. Prop 19 is, the good aspect of Prop 19 is that you have this ability for the base year value transfer to any county in the state, which is
6 times if you're married.
Is that right?
That's right, yeah.
So that's really good, but the impact that this parent-child issue has been dramatic, and I'm glad that the constituent raised this issue, because I hadn't really even contemplated, well, what happens in a rent-controlled scenario where the rents are held at a certain price, but the taxes are going up and forcing the sale of that property. So it does need to be fixed, either legislatively or through an initiative. And I think Member Vasquez is correct. He needs to speak to his elected official that represents him in the legislature, and we'll see if anything else moves forward. But thank you.
Thank you. I think that completes this portion of our agenda. Let's continue.
The next item is M2A, Public Policy Hearings, Impact of Public Calamities on Property Tax Administration, County Boards of Equalization, Assessment Appeal Boards, AAB Remote Hearings, follow-up on consensus items needing additional guidance regarding remote AAB hearings. This matter will be presented by Chair Cohen and Mr. Vasquez.
Well, not much to report out here either. I'll defer to you, Mr. Vasquez.
Yes, the only thing I would just mention is that more for the members, and if there's anybody on the line that wishes to chime in, I don't know if we have anybody, especially from our stakeholders, but I just wanted to thank folks in the past, especially that have participated with us, our partners on this. And I think it's important to ensure that everyone has the opportunity to bring to our attention any items that may need additional guidance in the future. This will give us a list, hopefully, to work on as we move forward on this particular issue. But like Chair Cohen mentioned earlier, it's pretty much an item that we're continually listing on our agenda. So it gives the opportunity not only for the members, but also the public and any of our stakeholders or partners who wish to chime in. I don't know if we have any written comments on this or anybody on the line who wishes to chime in.
Let's go to the public comment line.
We have not received a request for any in-person speaker, and no written comments on this item have been received, but we will go to the AT&T moderator. AT&T moderator, please let us know if there's anyone on the line who would like to make a public comment regarding this item.
And once again, to make comment by phone, press 10 at this time. And we have no respondents queuing up.
Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Yes.
I would like to see the AT&T people have an obligation to come forward and say, we want to be heard. When we call out now and say, hey, AT&T, is there anybody? We may have called them just as they went to the restroom and, and might miss them. Anybody that wants to be heard today, they've got all day long to let themselves be known that when this thing comes up, I want to speak on it. So whenever we inquire, AT&T would say, we have nobody. That's what I would prefer, instead of AT&T say, let's go out and find out. See, that's what we're doing now.
Yes.
I think we could maybe shorten things a little bit and make it more efficient.
Thank you. So I think we could continue moving on with our agenda.
The next item is N, public comment on matters not on the agenda. Persons who wish to address the Board of Equalization regarding items not on the agenda, please note that the board cannot take action on any items not on the agenda. However, the board can schedule issues raised by the public for consideration in the future meetings.
Thank you. Do we have any public comment?
We have not received any requests for in-person presentation and no written comments, but I could ask the AT&T moderator.
Thank you.
AT&T moderator, please let me know if there's anyone on the line who would like to make a public comment.
We have no callers in queue.
Great. Thank you. All right, well, members, do we have any final remarks of the day? Yes, Mr. Vasquez?
Yes, thank you. I was hoping to do them at the beginning, but I forgot that I had this here. But, so let me just, I guess in wrap up, to me, this has been an historical month with the confirmation of the first black woman to the U.S. Supreme Court. You know, we have Judge Brown Jackson will become the 116th justice to serve on the Supreme Court when she's sworn in several weeks from now. She is a credit to the legal profession, having served on the District of Columbia Court of Appeal and in lower courts for 8 years, and she will bring a great perspective to the highest court in the land. I commend our President Biden for his excellent choice. And as I was sitting here earlier, as we were talking just internally, as we're passing the baton, you know, from one great CEO, Ms. Fleming, now to Ms. Stowers, who's going to take fill her shoes. And I'm looking here to my right. Her shoes were obviously pretty big because Mrs. Betty Yee still hasn't found somebody to fill hers. But we're looking forward to whoever that may be in the future. But with that, I just wanted to put it out there and thank you, Madam Chair, for the opportunity.
Of course, thank you very much. Yep, Mr. Gaines?
If I could, just a comment in terms of what's happening in Ukraine. And I'm encouraged, I'm encouraged by the courage of Ukrainians and their willingness to fight for democracy. And also, I'm glad that we as a nation are doing what we can to supply them with what they need to fight for their freedom. So my thoughts and prayers continue to the Ukraine, and those also extend to Russians too, that hopefully we can arrive at a conclusion where democracy is saved. And thank you, I appreciate it.
All right, thank you. Any last-minute comments?
Yes, I'd like to remind the world that today is William Shakespeare's birthday.
Okay, thank you. All right, well, ladies and gentlemen, it's good to be back in person. I want to welcome our team, a new team member, Ms. Stowers, and bid Ms. Fleming adieu. And we will continue to see you, but in a different role. And with that said, it's 2:16, and this meeting is adjourned. Thank you. The next meeting will be scheduled for May 25th, 2022. Goodbye.